welcome everybody to July's podcast, and this month we're going to be doing a deep dive into limestone pavement, and at the Trust we're very lucky to have lots of limestone pavement on our nature reserves. And today we're going to take a walk. We've just parked the cars. We're going to take a walk up onto our fantastic Hutton Roof Reserve with Scott Petrek, who is our Southern Reserves Officer. How's it going, Scott?
Very well, thank you. Nice day for it. Always good to be out on a bit of pavement.
Okay, so we're going to take a walk up onto the reserve, see what we can see along the way, and we're going to meet somebody who's doing research into limestone pavements. Who's that, Scott?
So we're heading up to meet a PhD student who's Ezra Tattersall. So he's out from Lancaster University with Carly Stevens, and all the research he's taken part in is really going to be integral to what we want to do on the reserve, informing the management. We've kind of got an idea of what's going on, but having that scientific evidence would be really good. And it's all part of the Limestone Pavement Partnership that has been kicked off. So yeah, it'd be really good to see how he's getting on with his research and his field work, as the volunteers have been helping out with a lot of the work as well over the winter. Thank you.
Right, so here we are on Hutton Roof Reserve. We're going up to the top to see these beautiful, beautiful limestone pavements, but it's not all about just pavements, is it? There's so much more to these reserves than just the open pavements.
Yeah, absolutely. This, as you arrive, you're kind of into this sort of bracken glade here, and then behind it we've got areas of wooded pavement, and then it's a real nice transition as you head up this part of the reserve on Burton Fell. You go through that kind of wooded pavement into kind of mature scrub, into the scrubby grasslands, into the grassland up on top before you then hit the pavements that are dotted around. And it's really that nice mosaic that means you've got loads of different wildflowers, you've got loads of different invertebrates, loads of different breeding birds, so it's a real sort of asset. So the limestone pavements are mere kind of the jewel in the crown, but yeah, it's a real nice mix of habitats right across the site.
Let's have a walk up.
Yeah.
So we've just stopped here in the woodland on the way up, and there are these massive boulders. Now these are a feature of Hutton Roof Crags, aren't they? These massive boulders that seem to sit on top of everything else. Where have they come from?
So these are all evidence of when the land was under those glaciers, so they've been dropped as the glaciers have retreated. But I really think they give you a really nice flavour as you kind of working your way up through this sort of transition to habitat. Gives you an idea of what's to come with the big erratics that are here. So this one in front of us looks like an enormous big tabletop. We've got one that we passed just a bit further down that's quite nice and round, but it's got like a little bonsai juniper growing out the top of it, and there's another one further around that looks like a turtle's head, and they've all got a little bit of character to them as well. And yeah, they've got kind of different communities on them, but they just look like completely out of place. Like, how on earth has that managed to get there just under natural processes? It's massive.
Kind of really shows what the power of glaciation can do, doesn't it? And you know that the geomorphology of this place, the modern, in geological terms, history is what shaped it, and what shaped our limestone pavements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, all of this Carboniferous limestone, 350 million years in the making, has lots of processes that have gone over those millennia. Most recently, the Ice Ages is scraping them clear to what we've got today. But yeah, dropping big boulders like that, you know, this landscape was a real dynamic changing landscape over those millions of years, and left us with these really unique bits of habitat.
Yeah, let's go and find some. Have you ever been to Scott Petrek? Right, so we've just emerged out of the woodland into this fantastic open habitat, but we're still not on limestone grassland, are we? The limestone below the soil isn't having that influence on the vegetation at the surface.
Yeah, we look down, there's loads and loads of tormental this year. It seems to be having a really good year. We've got the bits like milkwort in here, but yeah, we're missing those kind of really characteristic, what we think like limestone grassland species, and particularly things like the blue moorgrass, the Seslaria. And it's a real mix here. So there's patches where it will appear where the soil is perhaps a bit thinner, but here it's, like you say, just kind of not quite thin enough and it's thick enough that we've even got things like heather growing in here, which you'd completely not expect to find in a limestone environment. But I really like this transition now where we're coming just out of the scrub, and there's bits of bracken around, which are obviously a problem for a lot of Cumbria and a lot of the country. But here, because we've got, historically had these rare butterflies, so things like high brown fritillaries, we actually need a sort of a bracken mosaic with that scrub. They've got that kind of Goldilocks period where they need a certain amount of bracken and a certain amount of litter to allow the violets and not allow the grass and not have too much scrub. So yeah, a really important sort of bit of the mosaic. But as you say, we're not yet on to kind of the top of the site and onto those limestone pavements, and already there's loads of stuff for us to see on the walk up.
And even though we haven't had a recording of a high brown fritillary, have we, for a few years, the place is still, I mean, we've seen a good few butterflies just on our walk up. The place is still really great for its butterflies, worth coming in the summer in this flowering period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing some of the butterfly transects this summer, and it seems to be a really good year for some of the other fritillaries, like dark green fritillaries, small pearl bordered. Seen lots of those as I've been walking around on the transects. We've got a population of northern brown argus here. I've walked up and down this very path in the past and randomly come across a white-lead hair streak nectaring on one of the plants on the side of the path. But yeah, currently, we're walking through the grassy area here, and it's just erupting with meadow browns and ringlets. Absolutely fantastic. So although those high browns are kind of just clinging on in Cumbria, and we haven't had any here for a little while, it's still going to be a really important place for a lot of the other species.
Let's go. Right, so here we are on our first bit of pavement, and already we're seeing the very specialist rare limestone pavement species of plants that this is such a special habitat for. What have we got here, Scott?
So immediately below us, we've got things like blue moorgrass, so the Seslaria, but the really nice one, the ferns are a really prominent feature of limestone pavements. So this is rigid buckler fern, and once you get your eye in, you kind of see it's absolutely everywhere across the pavements, and yet nationally it's a really scarce plant. And I think that's one of the things, like you say, is kind of we shouldn't ever take for granted kind of how amazing the species are on the pavements, that we've got things like bird's foot sedge that grow on a lot of the pavements around here that pretty much only grows around Morecambe Bay, a population out in sort of east of Cumbria, and then this random population down in Derbyshire, and that's it for the country. But yeah, we've got, I say, rigid buckler fern, a really prominent one. There'll be patches of limestone fern nearby, perhaps more familiar species, things like the hart's tongue fern, maidenhair spleenwort, wall rue. Those three species are things that you can see on pretty much every dry stone wall or building around sort of Kendal and the local area. And then we start working out through the pavement. So behind us, we've got a really nice patch of lesser meadow rue. And then ultimately, what a lot of people come up here for are the dark red helleborines. So those really nationally rare orchids, the really special colony that we've got up here. And they're just a bit further down the pavement. So hopefully we'll bump into those shortly.
This, though, isn't an intact pavement we're looking at, is it? And you said about seeing these species, especially the fern species, on the walls around Kendal and Lancaster and everywhere in between. That's where lots of this pavement has actually gone, isn't it? Because the surface has actually been stripped off this pavement in the past for gardening or for walls. And if you look round our towns and villages in this area, it's in the walls. It tops everybody's walls, and it was a real problem for limestone pavements being stripped off for gardening and for decorative stonework, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's absolutely everywhere, and just to think the mechanics of being able to strip some of this sort of big mechanisation, but it's all gone off for decorative stone or for dry stone walls and local buildings. But there was some research done back in the 70s that found that even back then there was only around about 3% of the pavements in the UK that were almost truly intact. So almost every pavement that we see has had some intervention to it, and as you say, this one's really heavily stripped, so we've got a lot of loose rock, kind of gravelly areas, but then it's kind of developed its own little community as well. Things like the helleborines, we've got a big colony up here. They seem to like growing in those gravelly areas, but later on when we get onto the true pavements and you see the grikes that are kind of 2, 3, 4 meters deep, and the sort of the crazy patterns all across the top of them, you realise how special and what we've actually lost. Thankfully now these are all protected, so that research that was done back in the 70s by Dr. Stephen Ward and David Evans, that led to that kind of protection of these sites through the limestone pavement orders from the 80s onwards. But prior to that they were really under pressure, and even into I think the early 2000s the research was showing that they were still being targeted illegally.
So obviously they were massively under threat for this water-worn limestone, stone for the garden, and that was put a stop to, like you said, by Warden Evans' research and the limestone pavement orders that came from that. But I mean, limestone pavement in itself is a ridiculously rare habitat anyway, wasn't it? Before it started being stripped. So and it's very much confined to certain areas within Ireland, within the British Isles, and a little bit of continental Europe. But otherwise, it isn't really found elsewhere in the world, is it?
No, so in the UK we've got, it's estimated around about 2,800 hectares, which can sound like quite a big area. Compare it to places like Skidder. But if you compare it to other habitats, we've got something like 3.2 million hectares of woodland and millions of hectares of peatland, even hundreds of thousands of hectares of species-rich grassland, which the Trust does a lot of work on to restore. So, limestone pavement's an incredibly rare habitat. As you say, other areas around the UK, but 80% of the UK's limestone pavements are either here in Cumbria or just across the border in Yorkshire.
The limestone pavements are still under threat, aren't they, because of other factors now, land abandonment and getting covered over with trees or overgrazing and all the plants being nibbled down. And we're going to go and visit Ezra on one of his plots in a bit and look at some of the work that's been looking at what the present threats are to limestone pavements. So we've got another couple of limestone pavement specialities here, Scott. What are these?
So just in front of us we've got angular Solomon seal. So this is the truly wild variety. People might have Solomon seal in their garden, so familiar with those kind of arched limbs and the little white bells that dangle down in the spring. But this is a much smaller variety, grows in the Crags here in the Clints. It still flowers early on in sort of April time. But kind of looks quite similar to this one we've got just behind us, which is Lily of the Valley, but nice and easy to tell apart because the Lily of the Valley leaves, they're coming up out of the ground, whereas the angular Solomon seal, their leaves come off a stem, but both quite early spring flowering ones, so they're just now in leaf. And then looking around, we've also got quite a few shrubs starting to come into this bit, which are actually juniper, which again, another species that up here on Hutton Roof we see absolutely loads of, and we mustn't take them for granted because again, nationally they're a really scarce plant, but we seem to have a brilliant population up on the limestone pavements here. And then mixed in kind of little bits of like Carline thistle, but I say what we're really looking for are those helleborines. That's what everyone really likes to come up for, and we've got a really special colony here. So just over the way there, we should start to see our first individuals.
So you've mentioned Clints and Grikes a couple of times now. Just tell us what Clints and Grikes are.
So once you're on a pavement, we've got a few different terms for some of the different features. So essentially, if you're stood on the pavement and you've got a slab of rock below you that's completely surrounded by these sort of deep fissures that go down, that block is called a clint. The fissure that is splitting it off from the other blocks are the grikes. I say those on some of the intact pavements we've got, they can be several metres deep. So I always make sure if I'm bringing a group up here, volunteers or people looking for different species, first thing I usually say to people when they come onto the pavement is make sure whatever's in your pocket's zipped up, because if your keys or your phone go down there, you're not getting them back. But then as well as the clints and the grikes on the surface, you've got different features which are called runnels, and these are kind of like the little pits and little channels that form across the surface of the rock. But as you say, they're kind of the things that you can see all the year through. So while we're looking for the plants here today, if you're into your geology and your geomorphology, it's a fantastic habitat to come and explore. And I think it just looks mad. I mean, you've described it as a giant marble run in the past. I kind of think, intact pavement looks like almost like a giant mammoth's tooth that you'd imagine seeing in the Natural History Museum. It's just, no matter how many times I come up to a pavement, how many times I walk around, it's just mad. And it's ace.
But they're all different, and from those fantastic pavements down at Gate Barrows, which don't seem to have a grike for miles and just great expanses of flat limestone, to the rakes over by Hutton Roof, which are deeply dipping beds with loads of grikes in them. So they're all different and they all have their own character. Let's go and find some helleborines. So Scott, 3 years ago you joined the trust and you'd never seen limestone pavement before. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it's one of those kind of fabled habitats in the textbooks as it was, and kind of didn't even realise it was, there was this much in the county. And then, yeah, looking through the job description and came for a wander up here and just thought, this is mad. It's like just such a unique, diverse habitat. And I came from primarily kind of a wetland and a birds background, and it's definitely kind of infected me over the last 3 years. I've kind of become slightly obsessed with it all. So yeah, helping out with the Limestone Pavement Partnership and bringing the volunteers up here, and even just like spend a lot of my free time up here, not work stuff, just having a look and getting to know the place and all the really cool plants and the butterflies and the bird assemblage as well. Yeah, it's just got something special about it, Limestone Pavement. It's really nice.
Right, well, here we are a bit further down the pavement and we've come across these wonderful orchids. Go on, Scott, tell us about these.
Yeah, so these are our really special dark red helleborines. So really nice type of orchid. You can see they're all coming into their absolute best at the moment. So they've got those really kind of dark red, sort of winey coloured flowers, really vivid green sort of paired leaves coming off the stem, all coming out of the bits of gaps in between the rocks and those gravelly areas. But this is got to be one of the absolute best places in the UK to see the species. It's one of the biggest colonies that we know of, and obviously we can't come up to this particular colony and this particular site without mentioning Brian York.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian was such a champion of Hutton Roof, and he just immersed himself, didn't he? From when he moved up here from East Lancashire, totally immersed himself into the natural history of the whole area. He loved Arnside and Silverdale, as his blog is called, and he did so much work finding these dark red helleborines, didn't he? I mean, lots of the species and lots of the plants he absolutely championed, didn't he? But these dark red helleborines were a speciality of his, and he was the one who started to discover these different colour variations that we've got here on Hutton Roof.
Yeah, so he really had that in-depth knowledge, and sadly passed away in 2022, so I never got a chance to meet him. But that blog being online, it's a fantastic resource for me to pour back through. But yeah, he recorded over 2,000 individual dark red helleborines across the Hutton Roof area. But as you say, he started to look and realised that they're not all that dark red, winey colour. Some are a bit paler, some are actually yellow. So he started the work on trying to work out what the varieties were and describing them. So we've got things like bicolour, and I think there's one called lutescens or luterescens. And the Hutton Roof again is one of those places. It's the most reliable place to bump into some of these unusual ones, and not least the rare hybrid that forms between dark red helleborine and broad-leaved helleborine. But yeah, Brian was up here. He's documenting every single individual. This is number 46, this is number 72, and today it's got 3 leaves. And then he comes back a week later, and the bud's just starting to form. And it's just a real amazing detail that he had. And then, as you say, all the other species that recorded, we're really fortunate at the Trust. We've got his old notebooks whereby you can see these kind of watercolour maps almost of, here's the trig point and walk 300 metres this direction to this tree, and here's the grid reference for this species. And it's just such an amazing resource to have for up here. And then his crowning glory was rediscovering holly fern just over the way.
Yeah, and that made the paper, yeah, which was absolutely superb. Not on our reserve, I must add. It was on the common area of Hutton Roof, wasn't it? But I should mention that Brian's blog is still on the internet if you want to have a look at it, and it's called I Love Arnside and Silverdale, and it's really, really worth a delve into because it's full of just fantastic nuggets. Yeah, I thought I'd just mention as well, we talked before about visiting Hutton Roof at all times of the year and how wonderful it is all times of the year. I thought I'd just caveat that with limestone pavement can be really, really slippery, and you do have to be careful. So health and safety warning, especially in the rain or after it's been very wet. It kind of gets this film on the surface where the acid has started to work on the limestone, makes it incredibly slippy, so you do have to be careful under your feet. These helleborines, these are loving the stripped pavement, aren't they? And there's way more here than there is on the intact pavement. But let's go and find some intact pavement, and we can describe that to the listeners. So we spend a lot of time looking down up here on Hutton Roof, don't we, because of all the wonderful plants. But if you look up, we've got this fantastic view. How many nature reserves of ours do you think you can see from here, Scott?
There's quite a few. Some of the ones that I look after, and so yeah, over the way there we've got brown robin, which is a really distinctive field in the middle of the wood. But then some of the other promontories, so you can see Whitbarrow down to Fowlshaw. You've got Humphrey Head, and then on the really clear days you can see right the way down to South Walney and Foulney. Whether you can just about peek Latterbarrow over the brow there, maybe. But yeah, it's a fantastic promontory. Like you say, we're always looking down at all the plants that are there, and down at down the grikes and the clints, and you kind of then look up and go, oh, actually, it's a really good view, and some of the best views of the lakes. You've got all the fells over there on the right. And then you've got things like Arnside Knot, over down towards Heysham and that way, and now across the rest of Morecambe Bay. It's really nice up here on the sunset as well. I can recommend that one.
Fantastic. And also, we are surrounded by these wonderful ruby-coloured cows. These are our management tool up here, aren't they? Tell us about the cows.
Yeah, really important ones. These are our red poll cattle, really nice and placid. There's a few sat down and a few stood up at the moment, so hopefully it's not going to rain on us. But yeah, they're a fantastic management tool, really important for grazing these areas of grassland we've got, and starting to help with some of the scrub management. But they do get a bit adventurous as well, so occasionally you'll find the cowpats out on the middle of some of the stripped pavement areas, like where we've seen the helleborines. But yeah, an absolutely essential management tool, and one that we really have to kind of balance, because we talked about other sites in the past where they can be overgrazed and there's very little on the pavements and the areas, or they can be really undergrazed, and then we start getting all this scrub encroachment coming through and the issues that links into. But yeah, these are fantastic animals. They're looking really big and healthy as well at the moment.
Yeah. Always the conservation conundrum, isn't it? Overgrazing, undergrazing, how do you get it right? And I suppose that's what we do our monitoring for.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as Ezra, who we'll meet when we get down to the pavement below us, we've got another student from Lancaster University that's trying to quantify that kind of impact on the pavements of the grazing, but also factoring in things like deer browsing as well. So if we're going in and doing a bit of scrub management, the cattle and the deer are helping us keep the regrowth a bit shorter, so we don't have to go in as regularly. So they're a really important part of the kind of the sustainable management as well. Resources are limited, and we can't chuck everything that we want at a site, but these are a fantastic asset that we've got here.
Well, let's go and find this pavement.
I think this one wants to be on the show.
They're so huge, isn't it? Right, here we are on some fantastic pavement, and like you said, Scott, earlier, it looks like the most phenomenal marble run, doesn't it? I mean, you wouldn't want to drop something and lose it down one of these grikes.
Definitely not. It's just got that really weird feature, and like you were saying earlier, with the kind of different characters of the pavements. We've got 8 pavement units on the reserve here, and there's 50-60 odd units around the whole sort of complex between here and Farleton Knot, but everyone's different. So this one's got a really weird kind of unique ripple to it. Then you go across, like you say, to Gate Barrows, you've got big areas of clint, so solid rocks with virtually no features on at all. Some of the other areas here on Hutton Roof, there's so many grikes you could barely take a step without risking going down one. But yeah, this pavement in particular is one of I think the most intact that we've got. And you can kind of see the difference as well from where we were on the strip pavement. There's noticeably fewer plants on here, but all the species we were looking at earlier are still on these pavements, so they would have exploited all these little niches beforehand. And just around us here we've got things like angular Solomon seal over there, and a bit of lily of the valley, and there's a few dark red helleborines up on here as well. But that kind of change we're seeing now, so with the threat of the stripping of the pavements for decorative stone is kind of hopefully past, but now as we touched on earlier, it's very much kind of a land management that's causing those changes, whether it's overgrazing, undergrazing, land abandonment.
Yeah, along with climate change and air pollution as well, isn't it, which are both which are much more difficult to deal with. And like you say, we mentioned Carly Stevens, didn't we, from Lancaster University earlier, and her work, and she basically went and repeated the whole Warden Evans survey of all the limestone pavements in the UK using their index, and found some really interesting results, both for pavements becoming more overgrown and pavements becoming more grazed.
Yeah, there's definitely that change. I think in that 50-year period, I think the figure was around about 63% of pavements had seen an increase in tree and shrub cover. But then equally, she found a lot of pavements that the trees had disappeared from. You know, they'd been cleared or they'd been grazed, and those species had been lost. So it really is striking that balance. And certainly here, we're definitely seeing the kind of the scrub encroachment side of things. So looking at kind of the impacts of that and how we're best to manage that change that we're seeing.
So I suppose the question is once a pavement has started to scrub over, and once you get the tree cover, you lose the special species, and you start to get this cover of mosses that starts to cover the bare rock itself. Is there a way in bringing back those special species, and is it something that we can then recreate? And Ezra Tattersall, is that right, Ezra?
Yes.
Ezra's been looking at that for your PhD at Lancaster University. Tell us a bit about the work you've been doing, Ezra.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a PhD student at Lancaster University. So Carly Stevens is one of my supervisors. And yeah, so my project kind of stems from that work that Carly did, repeating the Warden Evans survey, where she found that in certain places, Cumbria and Lancashire especially, there's been these real increases in tree cover on limestone pavement. So what I'm working on is trying to understand how we manage that problem. So there is certain guidance in place for limestone pavement habitats, but it's not really been based on evidence in the past. So we're trying to build that evidence base to understand better how we can manage these sites, and where there's limited resource and money, how can we be as efficient as possible and make sure we protect these habitats. So yeah, so as part of my work, we've set up some experiments, and then here at Hutton Roof we've also done some dense scrub removal. And that is trying to understand whether it's possible to go back once the pavement becomes particularly wooded, and whether it can kind of return to a more open state.
Conservation's always full of conundrums, and it's like you're always bettering one thing for against another, and those decisions have to be made. And I suppose the work you're doing is going to be able to point us in the right direction.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think here at Hutton Roof especially, one of the really valuable things is the combination of both wooded areas of pavement and open areas of pavement. So it's not that the wooded pavement isn't valuable. We have some really, really good pavement that's under woodland, and that supports different species to the open kind of limestone pavement. But as we're seeing this increase in tree cover, we're losing that heterogeneity, that kind of mosaic that often we talk about in conservation, of open and wooded areas of the habitat. And as we get that more sort of generally wooded areas of pavement, you do see this decrease in species richness.
Practically then, you are finding a piece of pavement with scrub on it, doing a survey, then getting rid of the scrub, and then resurveying as things come back in.
Yeah, exactly. So we use the before and after approach. So last year for some of these sites, they were all surveyed, the plots, before any work had been done on them, to establish that baseline. What is the plot like before we've done any work? Then the management comes in the winter. So over the winter we work with the volunteers to clear some of these plots. And then this year actually I did this. I resurveyed those plots last week. Go back and repeat those methods. The first year after any work, you tend not to see a huge amount, but by doing that every year for several years, be able to build sort of a picture of how those habitats are responding and what species are maybe benefiting and what are not doing so well.
But are you actually clearing moss off pavements where the moss has taken over underneath the shade of the trees?
Yeah, so on a small scale we've done some moss removal. So one of the things I found last year was that under these very dense wooded areas of pavement, you get very thick moss layers that come out of the grikes where you normally find the moss on limestone pavement, and kind of cover the surface of the pavement, and really it really affects how it looks and how things can grow in them, because it reduces the amount of light that gets through to the grikes. And one of the problems with managing scrub is that in some places that moss has kind of not necessarily retreated back into the grikes where you'd expect to find it, and it's kind of sat on the surface and blocked up the grikes. So what we've looked at is on that site, we removed small areas of those mosses to see whether that will also have an effect. So we've got a treatment for just scrub removal, but also looking at whether that additional moss removal has an impact, and whether that's something that we can think about in the future.
And it's one of those, there's other elements to it, those things blocking up the grikes. One of your other studies is looking at the scatter scrub, so that's sycamore, it's got a really heavy leaf fall. But then also, as we mentioned earlier, the deadwood and the impact of ash dieback, so you've got another study linked to that as well.
So this is actually the accumulation of material in the grikes and seeing if that's changing the soil and therefore the floral composition.
Yeah, so under wooded areas of pavement, the actual grikes change quite a lot. So you get more soil, but also they get blocked up with things like mosses, also leaf litter. So you might go from having a several meters deep grike to, as you've got very mature woodland on top of it, you'll lose that altogether. So over time it's possible that actually you'd lose that entire structure of the pavement, and therefore those species that kind of are specialists in the open limestone pavement might not be able to survive and find a home, really.
Because limestone pavement's not been looked at in massive detail, there's loads of things that we can look at. So it's really great that we've got the support of Lancaster University and Limestone Pavement Partnership to come up and help us understand how we're best to manage these habitats as well.
Yeah, but also I think we, and I know you do this anyway, Scott. We have to think of this Hutton roof massif as a whole unit, and our bit adds to that mosaic of habitats. So we've got lots of open pavement. There's lots of open pavement on the other side of the road, isn't there, on Farleton and on Clawthorpe. Less so here, but we've still got these wonderful examples. But it's all part of a much bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think the key for some of the research for me as sort of a land manager for looking after this site, if you look at an aerial photograph of Hutton Roof and you look at the pavements, we're getting this kind of fragmentation as well. Can we actually reconnect some of these habitats? It's not about prioritising one over the other. As you say, it's that mosaic approach. So the mature wooded pavements will always be really nice mature wooded pavements, but those areas of open pavement in the transition, can we safeguard them and manage them in a way that these specialist and rare species we've been looking at earlier can thrive? And we've got that kind of nice connectivity as well. I'm really keen to see this is a limestone landscape, so linking up with the Common and the National Trust at Holm Park Fell, Newbign Crags, Falton Knott, it is one big ecosystem essentially. It's all the same lump of rock, and it's a fantastic lump of rock because there's some really, really cool bits across here.
It really is. Excellent. What a great day. Well, I think we'll bring it to an end there. That was absolutely fascinating look into limestone pavements and all the things that are going on with the wonderful studies at Lancaster. Thank you, Ezra, very much for your time, and I hope it all goes well with your PhD. Thank you, Scott.
No, brilliant. Nice to have everyone up here, and especially for this year, which is that 50th anniversary of the first major floristic study of these habitats, and really celebrate just how amazing they are and get to see all those special species today. It's been really good.
Brilliant. And as always, thank you very much to Liz for making it all work. And we'll see you next month.